Black Ops Cold War, the most recent fully fledged zombie outing, which personally I feel is a mixed bag overall, in terms of maps and as well as overall experience. This COD was extremely rushed to get out the door to buy more time for Sledgehammer to release their next big title. Which one was it again? Oh, right. Well, let's see what they were able to cook up at the expense of the second year of content for Black Ops 4. D Machine. The introduction to the Cold War Zombies mode came in the form of a returning classic. This reimagining of Noctua and Toten serves not only as an homage to the beginning of the mode itself, but as the turning point into this new era of zombies. And honestly, it's a solid start. The map is actually fun to play. The only major negative things are more of a Cold War problem and less of this map's fault. But let's dive into this new entry and see what lurks beneath this iconic bunker, the Shockwave. This is an interesting wonder weapon, almost serving as the spiritual successor to the jet gun of transit notoriety, but is actually pretty useful. And the design of the weapon is actually pretty cool. It's big and bulky, but honestly I think it works to this weapon's benefit. However, there is one very familiar problem with it. It has 4 elemental upgrade variants, but doesn't suffer as much from one of them being too strong as much as none of them are as good as the traditional Shockwave. I'll admit some of them are better than others, such as the electric variant. Let's make this easy for everyone involved and buff up all of these variants to make the quest to obtain the canisters more useful. The quests are relatively quick and painless, but should each be better than the standard variant. Not to say that we need to nerf the standard Shockwave, just saying that the upgrades should feel like upgrades, and that's it. The Dark Ether. This is the entire premise of why the old zombie storyline is even continuing in the first place. And let me say, when I'm in the Dark Ether version of this map, it's when I'm having the most fun. I love this weirdly beautiful, almost cosmic aesthetic of the map with this colorful crystals and the massive vibrant jellies floating around. It's honestly wonderful. I just wish we could have had this feel more present in the map outside of opening pack and doing some Easter egg steps or upgrade steps. Aside from that, you don't really interact with this alternate worldview. I wish we got either so many rounds we'd plunge into the Dark Ether, or on dog rounds instead we could see more Dark Ether based enemies instead of the annoying gas hounds. The whole idea is that the Dark Ether is leaking out, bleeding into our world. And I think this perfectly conveys this effect, as this accelerator that was being used ripped the veil separating our reality from it. Pack-a-Punch. Albeit, I don't feel that Pack-a-Punch should be some impossible to understand process. It is too essential to gameplay to make it difficult to find out for players without a guide. But this is a problem in the complete opposite sense. It is the weakest Pack-a-Punch process we've ever seen. Go into the Dark Ether, find the ether tunnel that is highlighted with an objective marker, float down, grab one part, smack it into the machine, boom, Pack-a-Punch open. I just don't like this. At this point, why not just have it be there from the start, because it's only one extra segment past activating power. It doesn't add to the map at all. I would either add a couple extra parts that would be needed if we're going to keep it relatively the same, or making it to where the machine only exists in the Dark Ether. Having it be a twisted version of the classic Pack-a-Punch machine only residing in this dimension would be really cool in my opinion. Firebase Z, the first DLC and the map that I would argue snuffed out most of the community's enthusiasm. Set in an Omega facility in a valley deep in Vietnam, this map just lacks anything iconic to it, and anything that manages to climb to that rank is for all the wrong reasons. There were just so many strange decisions within this map, which we will come to talk about in the coming segment. Defense rounds. I enjoy things that spice up matches to avoid standard gameplay from getting stale. Forcing you to go to certain areas to avoid losing things works for me. Like the Templars on Origins, they make the player have to return to a generator they likely haven't been at since they activated it. In this map, there are defense rounds that require you to go to certain edge areas of the map, where after a timer, Dark Ether portals will appear, allowing for a flood of zombies to emerge, attempting to break the lines and disable a terminal before attempting to shut down one of the generators. Now, the first couple of times this is fine, but as the rounds progress, eventually you will also be met with Ordas, which is just an absolute nuisance with massive health and an attack that shoots hellhounds at you. I just think that these should be greatly reduced and not feature Ordas. This would make it take less time to complete the wave whilst keeping the secondary objective alive. Special zombies. If you've ever thought that a map should have more special zombies than regular ones, then I already know this map made your top 5. I swear once you're on round 30 or so onward, you will see nothing but mimics and manglers. The mimics spawn constantly, and it's not like they're dangerous or pose any real threat, it's just annoying seeing them all the time. It also takes away from the charm of a special zombie in my opinion. After all, if you see them just as often, if not more so, than normal zombies, then what's so special about it? I would rather these be more of a threat and spawn way less, because as it is, you just mow through them and there's 50 of them running on your screen at any given moment, and it's just not fun to play with. The Ray K. This Ray rifle is this map's wonder weapon. At release, this was a formidable weapon amongst the ranks of wonder weapon history, but for whatever reason, Treyarch decided to nerf it super unnecessarily. I just don't understand. I'm never on the side of nerfing wonder weapons. After all, where's the wonder in a weapon that feels weak? They're supposed to be special and allow for the player to feel insane for using a larger-than-life weapon. Not to mention, this weapon is basically just a knockoff AR version of the Ray Gun Mark III, but that's beside the point. Reverting this weapon back to its launch version would be a fine step towards improving this map as a whole. Mauer der Toten. This is a map I know I won't be popular for saying this, but I don't think this is the pinnacle of Cold War like most seem to think. This East Berlin map is a good one, but for me it takes the number 2 spot behind Die Maschine, and that's still commendable. There's a lot to like here, but for me there's also some things I don't really care for or could have been better. But with that being said, let's see what we can do to tear down some walls that would help me enjoy this map a little more. Disciples. These special enemies serve as an alternate take on the Ice Catalyst zombies from Black Ops 4, in that they function as a buff for other zombies near them, meaning players should prioritize dealing with them. But they don't wind up feeling that impactful really. You can burst down the zombies under their influence relatively easily, and they can be wiped out in no time themselves. Also, they don't seem to try to attack the player enough to make them a genuine threat directly. I am a firm believer that special zombies should be a threat. The Margwa from Black Ops 3 is a great example of a boss that adds to an experience and can pose a threat if it gets close enough to land a slam attack. I would change the Disciple's behavior a bit, making him buff zombies quicker and having them actually be substantially stronger while under his control. Then as a trade-off, make it to where once he's defeated, zombies revert back to normal. Also, it could maybe add to the threat of the map if the Disciple could enhance other specials such as the Krasny Soldat, maybe making him faster and more aggressive, but maybe this would be a step too far for the map, I don't know, maybe let me know down below. The Cerberus. This weapon is one of the coolest conceptually that we have ever seen. Starting as a pistol with this orb that rotates around the gun that fires as a secondary when you fire it. This is a hyper-lethal killing machine with a pretty fun quest to obtain. It also features the ability to shift into 3 other forms, being the Diffuser, the Blazer, and the Swarm. The gun turns into these variations by picking up special drops from zombies that correspond to the different weapon states. The main problem here is that these alternate states often feel like downgrades from the standard version. I mean, if you've ever done the boss fight on this map, you probably know that the base version of this weapon is great for dealing with Valentina's shield and large health pool, so often if I find myself playing this map, I typically choose to ignore any of these drops, and isn't that a shame? I want to use a wonder weapon that effectively is a 4-in-1, but their effects just don't back up that concept. Not to mention, I feel this method of changing the weapon by relying on drops is clunky, but I would ignore that if the forms felt good to use. So I feel that greatly improving the damage and ammo on these variations to make them more in line with the starting weapon would be a great call here. Pack-a-Punch. This is a quick one. The Pack-a-Punch on this map is one of the least interesting Pack-a-Punches in Zombies history. All you have to do is walk down the main road, you'll see it just sitting there. You interact with it, blast a handful of zombies and a Disciple, and boom, it's done. This doesn't take advantage of anything that makes up the map. I mean, we are in divided Berlin. There's just all sorts of implications of things that you could have used to better take advantage of this map's setting. To have a Pack-a-Punch just sitting out here and not take advantage of the map at all is really lazy in my opinion. Forsaken. A common complaint that was heard throughout most of Cold War's life cycle was the amount of reused assets that were being used in place of creating new things for maps. Don't get me wrong, Zombies was built on this after all. I mean, you can absolutely see this in World at War when maps were either from multiplayer or campaign, and even the original crew's models were ripped from the campaign. But in this map, it feels especially egregious to me. It is quite literally just ripped assets taped together and called a map. It lacks anything genuinely original to it to make it stand out in memory as it stands. It is just generic COD assets slapped together, so why don't we tack on some nice changes to shut out Cold War zombies? Abominations. Boy, did they just absolutely nail the name for this boss. It is an ugly Margwa-styled enemy, but more beastly in design. They are also different than the Margwas of Shadows of Evil fame, in that the Margwas are a phenomenal boss, and these guys are an actual mistake. If you were going to rip off the Margwa, then why not have some Dark Aether crystalline version of the Margwa show up, which would further set up the idea of things that were sent to the Dark Aether as a result of Black Ops 4's story are now breaking free back into our world. To me, this would help establish this map a little bit better with a proper boss. Map layout. This map has by far one of the worst overall layouts ever. It is just areas connected by teleporters or zip lines. It lacks flow. It lacks creative design, and most importantly, lacks fun. I'd rather get a smaller map that flows and plays well than a map like this. This map would need a total remapping, as it's just not fun to exist in this space. I can't really say a whole lot more than what I've already said, besides adding a better mechanic for traversing the map than just a lazy teleporter. All in all, this is just a horribly designed map. Pack-a-Punch room radiation. Lastly, a nitpick of this map. I hate the idea of a pack room being irradiated by these crystals around the place. Like, don't get me wrong, it takes a while for it to become damaging, but when pack is here as well as trial machines, I just don't know why this was felt to be necessary. There's something to be said for a timed Pack-a-Punch. Like, personally, I love the Shangri-La Pack-a-Punch, but to compare this to that is an insult to Shangri-La. I'd remove this altogether and just add a couple zombie spawns up there, because I understand this was to keep the player moving, but at the same time, they could just add zombie spawns, and if that doesn't move the player, then that's the player's decision to exist in that space, and I say let them. Well, that brings us to the end of our Cold War changes video. If you enjoyed this video, hit like. Next we'll be diving into something a little bigger, in the form of a future of Call of Duty Zombies video. You won't want to miss this. To avoid missing it, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Want to see me before the next video? Go check me out on Twitch at The Real Fighting Line 1. The link is on my channel page. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.